Yeah, we got so the first order of business, and I hope we can make this a relatively uncomplicated meeting, is for the minutes from the March meeting. Have they been distributed to everyone?
Yes, they have.
Does anyone have any comments,
No.
No.
changes? No? Okay, can I get a motion to accept the minutes from the previous meeting?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. So moved. I'm out of the country and I'm struggling a little bit with the technology, so I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I believe the next agenda item, Palmer, correct me if I'm wrong, is the correspondence.
Yes.
And we do not have any for tonight, so we can move on past that. Next item on the agenda is, um, sorry.
Conflicts?
Yeah, is there any item, any reason for anyone to recuse themselves from either one of the discussions we're going to have tonight?
I will. My daughter actually rents from them and has for several years, so I talked with Steve earlier and he thought that might be a good idea also, so I won't be voting.
Great. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move on to, we don't have any old business to discuss tonight. So let's move on to new business. And the first order of business, I believe, on the agenda is 1 County Route 8 submission. And I would invite the applicants to come before us and present their case. Just as an FYI for the applicants, it was not clear to this board exactly what it was you were asking of us. So this board has three responsibilities. One, to grant or not area variances. So things like, um, are you 5 feet away from your next door neighbor instead of the required 10 feet? Use variances as well as interpretation of the law. And I just want to tell you guys, and hopefully you can address this up front. It wasn't clear to us what you were asking for us from the zoning board. Whether you had in the application, it said use variance, um, uh, zoning variance, and other, but I didn't see any specific requests for any of those variances. So if you could explain that to the board, that would be most helpful.
Okay, first I'll introduce ourselves. I'm Doug Larson. This is my wife, Victoria.
Do you need them in front of that or can you speak?
X.
Oh, you have that.
He's standing up.
You gotta push that button.
Sometimes the X is over there.
Okay, yeah.
I
tonight
think you gotta
it's
push
here.
that button. Can't hear you.
Pardon?
So speak right into the mic.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm an architect and my wife is in communications, and we several years ago purchased Glenda Hermans's house at 2 County Route 8, the Brown house, right at the intersection across from the farmer's wife. And we restored that building, and along with that property came another structure, which has had tenants in it, residential tenants, existing tenants. And when the yellow house across the street came for sale, we thought we would purchase it because people were cold calling us and asking us for apartments because there's a dearth of housing here. And I also picked up the comprehensive plan for the town of Ancrum and read it, and there's a lot of verbiage in there about restoring the hamlets, bringing business to the hamlets, and providing housing. So we thought, great, we're the perfect people to do that. I'm an architect. We have places to rent. So we embarked upon a project to primarily get multiple use out of the yellow building. So that's this, probably all know this house, this one right here. It had multiple uses many years ago, and has as many room for 5 units. It's about 4,000 square feet. So I read the zoning code, and it was clear we had to go to the planning board. So we've been to two pre-application conferences and two actual meetings there. And at the last meeting, we were asked to come here to ask for relief from all of the things in the letter. So, and we can go down them one by one, I think. So I think the first one is the size of the lot. The lot is only a third of an acre approximately, when the minimum lot size is a half an acre. So that would be the first relief we need. I need the, what's this letter here? So, well, the planning board, I should just back up a little bit and say the planning board brought in Nan Stolzenberg, who's the consultant, and she's the one who wrote the letter to Mr. Crocco that told us to come to you for all of these reliefs and waivers. Not just relief, but waivers. They didn't seem comfortable granting waivers, even though the zoning code gives the planning board that authority. So, okay, so the first one is the lot size. Yeah, so no, just the lot size, the size of the lot. So we would need relief of what, 0.15 of an acre. The next one would be the width of the lot. So the width of the lot is 74 feet, 5 inches wide. It's pre-existing, non-conforming, but 75 feet is the minimum required lot in this zone, plus 2.5 feet per dwelling. So we have room for 3 apartments. We have 2 right now. So depending upon whether it's 2 or 3, we have to add another 2.5 linear feet for each unit. So we would need relief from the lot width. The minimum front yard setback is 20 feet. The front of the building meets that, but the side does not. The side is considered a front yard because it's a corner lot. So that dimension is 19 feet 7 when 20 feet is required. So we need relief of 3 inches. Okay, lot coverage is a little tricky. There's 2 different lot coverage regulations. So in the district, regardless of use, minimum lot coverage is 65%. My calculations show that we have 54% if you consider the parking lot impervious, but the zoning code also allows crushed gravel pervious parking lots. And if you consider the crushed gravel pervious, then we're way down, way below that. But then under multifamily, the lot coverage goes down to 50%. And if the parking lot is considered impervious, we need relief of 4%. But we would like to do a crushed stone parking lot, pervious crushed stone parking lot, and not count it as lot coverage. But if the consultants and the board decide that crushed stone is impervious, it has to do with the wording. If you look at the wording, it says parking lots or other impervious surfaces. So parking lot or. So I don't know how you construe that. So we might need relief of 4%. I figured we would ask for it because it's de minimis. And it would help us when we go back to the planning board and we say we got the relief that you requested us to get. Okay, Nan Stolzenberg also suggested we might need relief from the density requirement, but in the table for density, there's a dash in the Hamlet Business Residential District. So I don't know what density I should be asking for relief from. So I was kind of looking to whoever is the expert on the zoning code to tell us. I don't know if that would be Nan or the planning board or you folks. Might be Ed. So the next one, this is all in my narrative that I submitted. Minimum unit size. So the zoning code also calls for a minimum apartment of 800, or minimum dwelling unit of 800 square feet. So this building had a pre-existing apartment in it, which was less than that, at 566 square feet. So it's pre-existing, non-conforming, but the planning board again asked us to come here and legalize that. The third unit that could be a dwelling unit is only 461 square feet. It had been a dwelling unit many years ago. It has a full bathroom in it that's existing. That's 461. So to be safe, they said ask you for relief for both of those apartments, even though one was already existing. Okay. So now we get into, yeah, go ahead.
Is your colleague still with us? Oh,
Me?
okay. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yes.
Okay, you're still there. Yay. Okay. Just
Yeah,
make-
and
Because you-
maybe let me let me step in here for a moment because I'm a little confused as to why the planning board would have sent you to us for these issues. And at the end of the day, listen, we would love to see, I think all of us would love to see what you're doing come to fruition. But as a zoning board, we're bound by the laws, and we are very limited around the things that we can offer you in terms of relief. So things like lot size, for example, have got nothing to do with the zoning board. You could come to us and say, we would like relief from the 20-foot side requirement. Um, and because we're only 8 feet away, so will you give us relief for that? We can do that. What we can't do as a zoning board, and only the planning board can do, which is why I think our board is a little confused as to why you were here before us, um, is we can't give you relief for things like apartment sizes or impervious surfaces. The only two things we could do are give you an area variance. For example, 20 feet from the road, you're 10 feet away, you come to us and say, can I have 10 feet? 20 feet side, from the road, you're 8 feet away, you can come to us for a variance. These other elements are not anything that New York state law gives us the authority to do. So I'm struggling a bit with why the planning board would have sent you to us for relief around these issues when we do not have legal authority to grant them.
Well, we're a little puzzled ourselves. Uh,
Okay,
I
fair enough.
know, um, I thought the mandate of a zoning board was to give any dimensional relief, and that would include lot sizes and lot coverage. I don't think it's just setbacks, but it's dimensional relief. That's my
No.
understanding, but you would know better than I am because you're head of
Yep.
zoning board.
Yeah, well, we're called the Zoning Board of Appeals, meaning when somebody tells you no, you can come before us and ask for relief. So if someone tells you no, you can't do something because your setback is 8 feet, not 20 feet, you come to us.
Well, the planning board has
And
basically
we
told
can
us,
give you relief for that.
That's
But
what-
these other things that apparently the planning board has asked you to come before us, we are not legally allowed to grant you relief from. So just to be clear, we can do three things. we can grant you an area variance, meaning specifically you have to ask us, can I have a 8 foot setback versus a 20 foot setback on the side? That's an area variance. You can ask us for a use variance, which is it's a commercial building and we want to turn it into a multi-use building. Will you give us that relief? And third, we're allowed to interpret the law, but that's not really relevant here. So what you're coming to us for, we have no specific ability to react to because you're not asking us for a specific variance from a setback. So lot coverage, that's a planning board issue. They can issue you a waiver for it, but the zoning board under New York state law does not have the authority to grant you that. And by the way, as I'm telling you this, I feel terrible because I love what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But we are a bit challenged as to the lack of specificity that you're asking us for.
Well, I think 3 inches is pretty specific for a setback.
Okay, that one, you got it. That one we can absolutely have a discussion about. And that's an easy one.
So the overall issue here is how do we avoid being sent back and forth between the zoning board and the planning board? Is there a way for the planning board to talk to the zoning board and we're just doing what the planning board told us to do?
Maybe what we could do tonight, if it makes sense for you, is just to go through and get whatever we can get from you all. I think to begin with, just to say whatever, lot size you need and whatever you're allowed to give us. And at least we can do that. And then maybe like the apartment size too, if you're allowed to do that, or you're not allowed to do that.
We're not.
Or at least the lot size. And then if there's anything else that you think we could get approved or with you or and I would just like to go through and see if we could use our time as well as possible tonight.
Sure.
And then, I guess we'll have to go back to the planning board and say, well, there's certain things that they do have to decide. And it was difficult with the planning board a little bit. Like they were saying that, the parking lot had to be paved and we see all around us, unpaved parking lots and that have been approved by them. And it's a very rural environment there. And we are asking for multi-use if possible. It would be, 2 apartments upstairs and 2 businesses downstairs, but possibly 3 apartments upstairs, or we were hoping to have that as a possibility, but not necessarily, we won't necessarily do it. So those were the things that, like the parking lot, the size of the apartments, and the multi-use was what we were really focused on. And then the Mrs. Stolzenberger was saying also about the septic tank, but people have been living near the septic for a long time, but I guess that has to go back to the planning board now.
Yeah.
And then
So-
the county. So those were Doug's in charge here and he knows it so much better, obviously, than I do, but those were the kinds of things that we're hoping to do. Cause like Doug went through and read the comprehensive plan and it was like, okay, we're trying to bring back businesses to the community of Ancrumdale and we're trying to bring more housing in. And so that's what we're trying to do basically. And it's an old house. And like, that's, it's like, how much change can you make to an old house? Do you know what I mean? Without totally rebuilding it. And already Doug's put in tons of money and invested a lot of time and energy too. And we have 2 very happy tenants there now. And we've had offers for people wanting to set up a business there, but we've just said, we have to wait a little bit because, until we get these issues sorted out, like they can't go in there until the parking lot is settled. So that's kind of where we are right now. We've been to the planning board a few times and Doug's been going back and forth. So those are our kind of issues right now that we've been kind of managing and or trying to manage at this point. So, you know, Ancrumdale is small and we're we're not getting rich off of this stuff. We're not, you know, coming in and trying to make tons of money by any means. And we're just trying to make it work. And it just seems it feels a little bit like a lot of hurdles being thrown up, but we also know that everybody wants us to succeed and wants this whole thing to move forward too. And we know that. And so we're trying to figure out, you know, the best way through navigate the maze, so to speak. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at in a nutshell. That's
Okay, so let me
that's the anecdotal version.
let me respond to that.
Yeah.
As a zoning board, we do the best we can to be helpful to people. Our job is not to make this challenge for you and look for opportunities in the zoning law to tell you you can't do something
No,
because
I
I
get that. Yeah, thank you.
I
Yeah.
I
So,
think you're right. I think most people would love to see you be successful. You know, that said, we are restricted by the laws that we have to work under, whether we agree with them or not. And by the way, there is a zoning revisions committee that I happen to sit on that has also talked about changing that minimum square foot requirement from 800 feet down to something different. So the way that I think we can be helpful tonight is to listen to you and what you need,
mhm.
and then we will send a letter to Joe Crocco, who's my counterpart as the chairman of the zoning board, and let him know that these are the things that we think we are not able to give you relief for, and that are the planning board responsibilities. So let me give you one, for example.
Mhm.
New York state law supersedes Ancrum zoning law, and under New York state law, gravel driveways and gravel parking lots are considered impervious surfaces. So we can't change that. There's nothing we can do to, you know, or the planning board can do to change that. And in terms of lot sizes, for example, we cannot give you relief from coverage on a lot size. Only the planning board can waive that. What we can do is if you were to come to us and say, forget about the size of the lot, we want to have a setback of X feet on the side, X feet in the rear, X feet in the front. Zoning law doesn't allow us to do that. Will you give us relief? And that is something that we can absolutely do.
Okay.
And I feel for you guys right now because you must be thinking, wow, are the planning board and the zoning board like not talking to each other, or you know what's going on?
No,
And so
I get where you're coming from and you have your job to do and you have laws you have to obey because otherwise everything will go kerflooey, you know, if you don't go with the regulations and the laws and everything. We totally get that. We're just trying to figure out like, can we make this possible? You know, or is this
yep.
really something that's not possible? Or, you know, like how do we, or do we just throw up our hands and say, oh, it's just not possible and leave it, and, you know, and then nothing happens. And that's where I'm sort of like, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's where because we're kind of at that point where you're saying like, wait, we just got pushed from the planning board to go to the Board of Appeals. And I know you will write a letter and everything, and that'll be helpful. So hopefully the planning board, you know, will listen and I don't know, work with us, I guess.
Yeah, well, so here's what we'll do. Why don't you finish what it is that you wanted to talk to us about tonight.
Okay.
And then we will, as a zoning board, write a letter to the planning board. And obviously where this is not acrimonious. I mean, this is collaborative, saying, these are the things that the applicant asked for that we do not believe we have the authority to grant. We're asking you to consider relief for them. And we will also come back and tell you, here are the specific things that you can ask from us that, according to New York state law, we're allowed to grant you. Because what we're trying to do here is to be collaborative and helpful, not to give you a hard time, because I think what you're doing is great. So,
Thank you. No, and I did get it.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I do believe that. And I believe that from everybody, and even the planning board wants us to succeed. And I think they're just getting sort of maybe just nervous. I don't know what maybe it's new what we're trying to do. I'm not really sure, but we don't feel acrimonious in the slightest. We just want to move it forward, So thank you for that.
great. Are there any comments from any of my colleagues on the zoning board here before we have you guys continue?
Maybe just when they're finished. Yeah, I'll hear the rest.
Well, it's, yeah, I just want to echo what Tori said. Thank you for being a sympathetic ear. And I think a letter back to the planning board, that's what I was going to ask. If you could write a letter back to the planning board, and I'm sure all you can do are the points of law, but if you could offer an opinion, that might help us. The planning board at our last meeting was pretty adamant that they wanted us to pave the parking with asphalt and put stripes on it, which is not what we'd like to do. And so they were very adamant about certain things they wanted us to do. So we thought actually coming here would help us out because you might see things our way. But and then I guess the reason we're going to the planning board is a special use permit for multifamily and site plan review for the businesses. If we drop the third apartment, the special use permit will fall. So that's a strategy. We could just get rid of the third apartment, and then all we have is site plan review. So we could use some help with strategy if you have some insight onto that. And if for some reason the zoning board or the planning board isn't helpful, what is our recourse? Do we need to go talk to the supervisor? What is how do we make everyone talk together to make this happen? Is there a device to make that happen? Is there an avenue, right, other than your letter?
So a couple of things, and I do not want to get crossways with Joe and the planning board, so I'm not sure why they are requiring you to pave the parking lot. That is not a requirement in the zoning law. Um, Clear, period. That paved parking lots are not a requirement in the zoning law. So I don't know why they're asking you for that unless it has something to do with the septic system. But if you go through the zoning law and you look at the various elements around parking lots, and parking, there are no requirements around paving. So we can include that as a question back to the planning board. And I know we have a member of the planning board here tonight in Palmer who is filling in for our clerk, who is otherwise indisposed for some family issues. So anytime, Palmer, you want to jump in here, let me know. But certainly we will include that as part of and point it out as part of a letter that we would write back to the planning board. But at the end of the day, they do have that authority to require it or not. it is not something that the zoning board has any authority over.
All right, so then I'll just go through the rest of the points and just explain our reasoning, and you folks can decide whether it's something you can opine on. So the density, oh gosh, where were we?
No worries.
Hey, we talked about the lot coverage, and it's tied up in definition of impervious and pervious. Off-street parking. So, oh wait, sorry. Oh, when I got to density, which has a dash in the line for residential density, so there really is, I don't know what the residential density is in the Hamlet district. It doesn't say. Minimum unit size, we already talked about. Multifamily dwellings in that section, special supplemental regulations, is a lot about sidewalks. Sidewalks connecting to other buildings, sidewalks connecting to sidewalks. There's no sidewalks anywhere in any of the hamlets, so I don't really know how to comply with that. It's and we certainly don't want to be putting concrete sidewalks all over and be able to connect to the farmer's wife, and so I'd like some thoughts about that. Off-street parking. I've done a bunch of studies about how many cars we can fit in the rear yard. We've gotten an easement from Job and Emily to enter the back of the property because we really don't want to cut those 3 big silver maples down. I mean, we could cut one of them down and drive right through on our own property, but I think it would be nice to keep them. So we can fit about 11 or 12 cars on the lot. And there's provisions for relief from the planning board for a number of parking spots. But if we can fit that much parking, I'd be open to a dialogue about what uses are approvable with that many cars. And I gave a chart that showed the different permutations of different combinations of uses, and also time when people would be parking there. If they work, they're gone during the day. If they're a business, if they're working for a business, they're during the day. So there's actually times when you can double count parking spaces. So there's some verbiage in here about that.
This is Steve, this is where I'm a little confused, because usually these calculations were done at the planning board, like the parking space. If you're gonna have some residential dwelling, plus you got commercial, and we have that, or Eddie, the building department, they have that drawn out in the chart, how to calculate the parking space.
I think that's why one problem we come back to is how many apartments are gonna be there.
Yeah.
And then you know, it seems like if we figure that out, we know where we're gonna go from there.
Yeah, but we did all that in the plan, as far as like for septic systems, for the small lot, everything was. And then once that point, if it was rejected, then anybody asking for a variance, fill out paperwork on the zone.
That's an historic house too. Has something, historic house, something about that too, as far.
Doug actually made plaques.
It's what?
Doug made plaques and had plaques put on with a history. It is a historic
Yeah, I thought it.
house, so,
So there, to me,
but
there's hurdles in the planning board department, going to the health department and water. We know that, we can improve that, add more well. Which is the happens. But those are things you have to hurdle through to get. Get where you approved and get it, and that's for variance. If you call it relief, we always call it variance, right? Word relief comes from all of us. I had 16 years on planning board, so that's a new word to me, release.
It's a
So
tough
the-
house where it sits.
Yeah,
As far as in being able to hit all the dots,
Yeah,
because of the way that house is and where it sits.
I understand.
Yeah. Then I have to, a lot of variances.
So the planning board did ask us, the engineer asked us to talk to the county health department, which we're doing, the highway department, the fire department. So we're doing all of that. I didn't put it in this letter because we're handling that as a design professional directly with the county health department. So when we have that information, we're going to go back to the planning board. I just put in this letter the things that we would have trouble complying with that are in the zoning code if you take it literally. And in terms of a historic house, the building code actually does the building code that applies here is the existing building code of New York State, not the building code of New York State, which gives you, there's passes in that because they don't want everyone to have to tear all their buildings down to make them comply with current code. And then on top of that, if it's a historic structure designated by the state or the country, which it is, it's a National Historic District, there's additional relief about not having to change width of doorways and things like that that would destroy the historic fabric. And we do need to make it ADA accessible, but we don't have to put a ramp in front of it. Like there's definitely provisions in the code that allow a historic structure to have access from a different spot. So that was also a point of contention with the planning board. We would not like to put a handicap ramp on County Route 8, right in front of a historic building. So that's not your issue. That's a building department issue. It's really Ed's jurisdiction. But the planning board is weighing in because it's a site plan issue. So those are the issues we're really concerned about. And I'll do the due diligence with the health department and the highway department. It's all of the dimensional things and the gravel parking lot and the ADA ramp that we need help with.
Okay, so just to summarize, we will send a letter to the planning board, letting them know the items that you brought before us tonight that are clearly out of our jurisdiction under New York State law to resolve. For your own edification, if you come to us with specifics around setbacks, front, side, rear, doesn't matter what they are, those are things that we absolutely can consider to give you relief from. I don't know that this is really a use variance issue for us because it's a multi-use building that is clearly allowed. But if there's some issue with that, then you can come back and we would, we would deal with it. But the rest of these issues seem to be ones that the planning board is got the authority. And by the way, I'm not trying, I would love to be able to handle this for you. It's just that we're very limited under New York state law around the things that we can do. So,
Now, we understand
but
that.
I will do my best to be clear with Joe and the planning board around our perspective and our opinion and see if we can't, um, lay out some runway for you to follow to get the things done that you need to get done, which in my mind, and I'm inviting the rest of the zoning board to offer their opinions here, seem to be waivers that the planning board can offer for you.
So I'll just comment on the multi-use. At the beginning, the planning board was scratching its head about mixed use, first of all, because there's nothing in the zoning code that specifically addressed mixed use. So they got a letter from Nan Stolzenberger. Ed asked Nan, can there be mixed use? And her opinion was residential is allowed, businesses are allowed. So you can have mixed use in the same building. And then the question about use variance is interesting because in the chart, if there's a P in the box, it's permitted. We just go get a building permit and you work it out with
Yep.
the inspector. But the two things we're asking for is multifamily is special permit. So it's a SP. And then there's site plan. So when you see an SP or site plan review, special use permit or site plan, does that mean your board has the authority to waive that because it's not permitted as a right? If you do, then we should talk.
What we have the authority to do is interpret the law if someone specifically asks us the question, a question about that law and ask for our interpretation of it. That is within the purview of the zoning board. And we also ought to be clear about site plan review and abbreviated site plan review, which are the two options that are allowed under the law that Ed, as the CEO, can tell you. In fact, we're going to talk about this later on tonight. As a matter of fact, we've been asked to interpret the law around whether or not an abbreviated site plan review is required or a site plan review is required.
Yeah, I can't remember why we're not a candidate for abbreviated site plan review. It's probably because it's a special use permit. But if we
Well,
drop,
I think there's within the zoning law, there is specificity around commercial use. So if there is a commercial use associated with a building, typically that's required to have an SPR, not an SPR.
which is understandable, people want to know how
Sure.
site's being used and how many cars are coming and going. So
Sure.
I think Tori wanted to say something.
I think we could just drop that request for a mixed, keep mixed use, but drop the multifamily, just leave it with two apartments. Yeah. I mean, someone has already expressed interest for the office and using the apartment upstairs as like their office, so it could just stay as that.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, I mean, it makes, it
Great.
sounds like it makes it easier though, like parking and everything, right?
Great.
Yeah, we just have to make it work.
Well,
Yeah.
I wish we could have been more clear to you tonight, but you're seeing an example of some of the complexities of the zoning law. But let me reiterate, we will send a letter to the zoning board telling them about the requests that you made of us and offering our, it's not an opinion, it's the reality that the zoning board of appeals does not have the authority to grant. First of all, we don't have the authority to grant waivers, period. And secondly, we only have got the authority to grant relief around specific setback requirements, area variances, and use requirements, neither one of which you've asked us for tonight. So,
So we can ask for setbacks with you.
Yeah.
That we
Yes.
can do, and that's it right now.
yes,
Okay.
if you have a
Like,
setback request, absolutely, you can ask us for that, and that is something that we can discuss. And just for your edification around the way the board works, which is pretty much the same as the planning board, is we'll listen to your application, we discuss it tonight, and then 30 days from now, we have a meeting that's open to public comment where people can offer their specific opinions. Rarely does anybody ever show up to those, but it is what it is. And then that night, we typically would actually discuss it and grant our opinion through a vote in a very public forum.
okay, well, let's just get.
We can go through the list quickly, which is lot size. You can't give us relief from that, it sounds like.
No, we cannot.
But the 20-foot front yard setback, you can. That's an
We
existing building
absolutely.
that's 3 inches past the setback, so. Lot coverage, you don't get involved in lot coverage, so,
No, we do not.
Here, everything's on the survey map.
sorry,
That is, it's a survey map of the set.
it's on the survey, yeah. So lot coverage, you don't get involved in lot coverage.
We do not.
Parking, you don't, density calculation, that's an interpretation thing. What is the density required in the hamlets? There's a dash in the chart. So
If you're looking for an
interpretation, that's-
interpretation, you can specifically ask us for that and we will provide that.
okay, so I guess we'd like to know what is the density requirement in the hamlet?
Can we make these things verbally to you now? with our,
No, unfortunately, they need to be in writing
okay,
that, but
okay. So
sorry,
we will
sorry.
ask for a 20-foot setback in the front and we'll ask about the density and we'll put this in writing for the next meeting.
Yeah. So I think what you want is a 3-inch setback, right?
3-inch setback.
Right. Sorry, that seems so simple, but it is what it is.
3-inch setback. We need to know about the density and the rest is parking. Okay.
Parking, I have a question about some, the whole rear parking area, they have. Platforms.
Nan Stoltenberg's letter said the zoning code. The zoning code requires striping of parking spaces, or it's at the discretion of the planning board. And she pointed out that it's very difficult to stripe a crushed stone parking lot. So that pushed the planning board to say, well, you should pave it and stripe it. But we can see the liquor store across the street has crushed gravel with no striping and parking blocks. And they didn't even pave their ADA parking space. So
Seems
I
like parking lots would be enough to have on crushed, right?
well, that's what I wrote in my application.
So. I think there's a legitimate, maybe Jim can help me out with this, but I think there's a legitimate. Something that we can look into. Or I think. There's a definite difference between crushed gravel. And driveway gravel that's certified by New York State. It's a completely different product, I think. I don't know if Jim feels that way or not, but. I want to make sure that. Because in our zoning law, it does say it's permeable. And so, I mean, I think we should really find out. What New York State's law, what that product really is.
The zoning code actually says crushed stone. So that's sort of a
I have a
ambiguous.
question too. You mentioned sidewalks, but the parking in the back behind the building is gonna be just for the tenants?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
why do they need to have a sidewalk to get, they don't really need a sidewalk to get to their apartments. They could just walk on the grass, right?
Well, as Doug was saying, they're saying it's for the one ADA spot.
Yeah, the planning board asked us to do a paved walkway from the ADA parking space to the door. Because the ADA code requires a certain surface that's easy to roll on. Now, there is actually bound gravel that you can use that meets ADA requirement, or it's concrete, or it's asphalt, or unit pavers, like big pieces of bluestone, as long as the joints are small. So all the planning board was asking us for was a way to get from the ADA parking space to we're gonna propose the rear door because it gives access to both spaces. But if you take the zoning code literally, it says we have to provide sidewalks everywhere, back to the street, back to the other buildings. And that's what I was trying to head that one off at the pass, so we didn't have to put sidewalks in the whole hamlet of Ancomdale.
On the print here, this front, you're asking for a 20-foot, you said for 3 inches,
Sidewalk here.
this one over here. This is 17.8.
Yeah, it's on my
plan.
They didn't give us all the protection. It's this. You're right here. So it's 20 feet. And the side is considered a front.
This is the one we look for with the seal.
Yeah. So you can see it right there. It's only 19.7 when 20 is required. But it runs on a slope. So I believe this corner of the building is 3 inches lower than the setback. This one makes it 23 feet 4 inches. 20 feet is required. Setbacks are measured from the center line of the street.
We're trying to make the back the back is a beautiful garden right now. And the previous owner made this lovely garden and field and we're trying to keep some of that, a little bit of it, so that our tenants can enjoy that. And there's three beautiful big maples. So we'd like to keep that. And they have these little garden shed huts and keep that. And then beyond that would be the parking lot.
How far up does the driveway come, like to where the
So,
pool is now, or?
yes, like where like it would come to the edge of the pool closest to the house.
Okay.
And the pool obviously goes away.
Yeah,
Right, and so and there's room, there's plenty of room back there, and the garden back there would go away. I mean, maybe I can keep a little narrow strip of something nice, but all around, I don't know, have to see. But the rest of the plants, yeah, there's a bunch of peonies still there. I've got a ton of stuff that we're gonna have to move forward. So that's the whole idea. So we'd rather not pave it just because it's not in character with sort of a rural village.
Yeah.
A hamlet. And so it just gets really hot and it's just, yeah. So we're hoping to keep the gravel if possible. I mean, Mr. Croco did not seem to be too thrilled with that idea, but maybe he can think about it. I don't know. Because we do see a lot of examples of gravel around. Yeah. And I think the ADA, like the car would be right next to the farmer's wife or next to the, where the farmer's wife is. And in that area, the car could be there. And then there could be a little walkway to the back, for the ADA, if that's, for someone, if we had a wheelchair, someone who's unsteady on their feet could do that, a little walkway to the back door. So yeah, that's it basically, step by step, we're trying to get there, but we could, we don't have to, like you said, like we don't have to do make it a multi-unit dwelling or whatever that's called, multi-family. We can just keep it as two, and that's fine with us as well. So that would be like one thing we could just take off the table and not worry about. And we're hoping to bring in a little business on the side and then have more of a stable, like a officey type business on the other side. So
well, I know Paisley and Diego like the yard very much.
I know, they do, yeah. Yeah.
And they mostly belong to Paisley, so.
I know, they're pink, I know, yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time and thank you for writing that letter too. That's really appreciated, and hopefully we can move forward and maybe talking about a different type of surface to the planning board would help to make it permeable instead of, yeah, maybe that would help. Thank you for that suggestion. Might be helpful.
It seems like it look into that. I would work.
Thank you. That would be great.
So next steps for us are to be specific about the 3 inches and the interpretation about the residential density in the hamlet. And then we'll come back next month and we'll talk about that. And then you would clear us for a public hearing for the 3 inches the month after that. So 2 more meetings, right?
Yes, and in the meantime, we will also send a letter to the planning board, to Joe and the planning board, just letting them know the items that we discussed tonight and clarity around the fact that a number of them, like lot size, are out of the legal purview of the zoning board, and that's something the planning board needs to resolve.
It could be that's all that Nan Stolzenberg was asking us to do, is to have you look at this and say you don't have jurisdiction and then go back to the planning board.
Yeah, yeah. And to be clear, Nan is terrific. We use her a lot. She's also an outside consultant with an opinion, and that opinion does not necessarily mean that we have to follow her advice, just to be clear.
Okay.
All right, thank you guys, and thank you very much for what you're trying as a member of the community. Thank you for what you're trying to do. I hope we can ease the path to a decision for you.
Well, it's a special little place. And it hasn't been, it's pretty intact. So
You know, something
Are
that,
there any other questions or comments from the planning board? Sorry, from the zoning board here tonight?
Steve, one of the things that's kind of, I didn't know if you knew that but when I rented my office space from there for 12 years before Morrison's bought it, there was 2 office spaces there and 3 apartments. They changed it into a residence and left one of the apartments, and they kept their retail store downstairs. So it just seems, that it seems silly that, I rented it for 12 years the way they're trying to make it. And it's kind of hard to see them going through all this.
Noted.
I didn't realize you went for 12 years.
Yeah, I rented an office space there, yeah.
And Annie had her dress shop.
Annie had her dress shop downstairs. Two of my employees rented that space from her. And then I had an office there as well.
Well, part of the house was sinking, so we fixed that.
We were-
Because we had the video store right at Glendon, so across the street,
Well,
before the restaurant years ago, the video store.
I moved out of there in 2002. And so I think Morrison's bought it probably, did you say 10 years later?
I don't know how long it. We met them at the end.
I remember her shop being open
Right.
and, for one summer and then it closed, I think, and she closed it. So we came in like right around that time, or we became aware of it.
Well, thank you for listening.
It's a beautiful
Thank you.
structure, really is. It's amazing structure. Yeah, I'd like being there.
Yeah. It's nice. It's a nice building. We'll see. Hopefully we'll make it work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good luck.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, interesting discussion. Palmer, we're going to have to collaborate on your notes and minutes from the meeting to figure out the letter we want to send to the planning board, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty confused as to why the planning board would have sent them to us for these topics, but you know what?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure because I think one thing that it complicates it is going from 2 family to 3 family. That complicated the issue and it changes some of the calculations that they need to make.
Yep.
So I think they have to start there. That has to be the starting point is, are they going to have 2 or are they going to have 3? And if they're going to have 3, can they get a waiver for the square footage?
Right. Okay.
Hey, for septic, you get into something like this.
Well, that's the other,
Yeah.
that's another issue.
And then the water,
But the engineer didn't like septic underneath the parking lot.
yeah, I
So,
was gonna say, when you talk parking lot, yeah, and then now they want a blacktop it.
but the blacktop, I don't agree, I personally don't agree.
Talking plan for health departments, so now-
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, you gotta go.
But they can design one for that. I mean, I've had them designed for not much bigger than this, self-contained agitator, you're supposed to be able to drink the water when it comes out.
Yeah.
So expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But that, I think I see that as the planning.
Yeah, it is.
Health
It is.
department's got
Yeah.
an engineer, health department's
Yeah.
got a.
Yeah.
They gotta
Well,
get-
there are a lot of moving parts is all, but
Yeah,
to
that's-
say, there's a lot of moving parts and they're trying to move forward and they're,
Need to get.
Yeah, I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're trying to jump the system
Yeah.
that we have, process.
Right.
Correct,
I
Steve?
don't think they have.
No, they've
I
been
don't
doing
think
this
they
for a
did.
long
They've been doing
time.
this for
Yeah.
a couple of months. And
No, it's longer
they
than
were
that.
told, they were told to do this.
yeah.
They were told to come
Here,
here
here.
from Nan and from Joe Bracco.
It's the-
So I mean, I think I'm a little frustrated because no one's telling them, this is what you gotta do.
Yeah, and this is, you gotta
Oh,
do
no,
A,
if you
B,
want those
C,
3
D.
apartments, you need that special use permit.
Yeah.
Somebody's gotta tell them
Usually
Yeah.
correctly what's
Yeah,
going on.
exactly. I agree with you.
Planning board, you call Dan, and you send it to our attorney, and his interpretation gets thought.
I think it's been too wishy-washy for them for
I
2 months.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I
think
know.
that's the problem.
Lissa,
It's not-
Lissa
it's
rented
clear.
from them over top of where Glenda used to have her little cinnamon twist. She rented over top of there. And they had said to her, we're going to buy across the road. We'd like to put another apartment there. Being have the baby, would you like to move over there? We're gonna make 2 bedrooms, 2 bedroom apartment. She said, yes. Okay, it was supposed to be by Christmas time. No, it was supposed to be late summer. Late summer came, late summer went, then it was fall, then it was December. I don't think she finally moved over there till February probably. So it was just kept moving like months and months and months from when it was supposed to be, and they're still
That might
working
have been
on
the
it.
construction though. I think when they opened it up, they found out it was a lot worse than they thought. Like construction normally happens, I think.
Yeah.
Renovation.
But yeah, renovation especially, but, all right, so they want to have 3. What do they need?
Right,
If their apartment sizes aren't big enough, how do we get relief or variance on that? Who do we go to for that?
right,
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Right.
who do we see? No one's giving them an answer.
Exactly. That's right. I agree.
Well, the only answer right now, from a legal perspective, irrespective of how we feel about whether the zoning laws are fair or righteous, is a waiver from the planning board. Now, the ZRC is currently in discussions around changing those numbers, as Carol certainly knows that we think 800 is way too much for a requirement, but it is the law. And right now, the only relief that can be provided is the planning board giving a waiver. And as far as the parking lot goes, there is nothing in the zoning law that requires a paved parking lot.
Only, but I guess, but there is still a problem with that. You know, we really need to settle the impervious, pervious question about that.
I don't think we do, Will. New York state law supersedes Ancrum law, and New York state law is very clear that a gravel parking lot is considered impervious.
Impervious.
Yep. I don't agree with it, but it's what the law is, and the reason that they when if you do the research on it, the reason that New York State says gravel parking lots are impervious surfaces is their perspective that over time, crushed gravel gets driven into the ground, gets covered again by more crushed gravel, gets soil on top of it, gets oil on top of it from parking, blah, 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 and therefore becomes impervious. So whether we agree with it or not, that's what New York state law says, and that overrides anything that that Ancrum would want to do. When it comes to the zoning laws, we can enhance New York state laws. We can't override them. Okay. Well, okay, we spent a long hour on that. We still got one complicated topic to go, which is the request for Ed for an interpretation of the law. And my perspective on this is I'm not going to involve the lawyers in this. I don't think this is all that complicated that we need to have, pay a bunch of money to our outside resource, um, to like we did last time around the mines, which was very complicated. But I think we learned a lot from that, and hopefully everybody has done what I've asked, which is to bring the zoning law with them tonight, have researched the request from Ed, and it's very clear that the zoning law is in conflict with itself. And what we need to do tonight is form an opinion or not about whether or not we think that there's a requirement for an abbreviated site plan review or a full site plan review for the request from the liquor store across from Town Hall that would like to put up a temporary 8 by 10 or 10 by 10 farm stand and sell local vegetables and local products uh, in at the back of her parking lot, which would put her very close to the stream and wetlands back there. The stream, everybody knows, runs right behind the liquor store there. So I think it's an interesting.
There's an exception there of 150 feet now.
What did he say?
There was an exception of 150 feet to that, under that exception rule, I was reading, for that farm stand. Did you read that?
I didn't read, all I saw was that it was abbreviated, when it said farm stand in that district, it said, that it required an abbreviated site plan. And then when you go into the,
I don't have the detail.
and then when you go to, when you move back to applicability, it says any use listed in the use table required an abbreviated site plan. So I don't, or there's another contains or within 150 feet measured from the high water mark. So to me, it looks like it doesn't seem like it should meet it, but it still looks like it should get an abbreviated site plan.
Yeah.
Have others on the board researched this? Then does anyone else have an opinion as to whether or not Ed's perspective that it's an abbreviated site plan review versus a site plan review? Because to me, the interesting issue here is it's a commercial use, which requires a site plan review, but it's also got some nuances to it around agriculture, et cetera, that would say it could be abbreviated to per Ed's opinion. So I'd like to hear opinions of, from the board. What do you think?
Not a full-time thing, they're only gonna have it like for what, a couple months of the year? They won't be selling vegetables and that in the winter, so it's a temporary setup, whatever they're gonna do there.
Yep.
Wonder, make some difference. They know about what times they're gonna use it, what are they gonna sell, vegetables and that, or?
Farm products, right?
Yeah.
Old farm products, and you're probably looking at, what, 3 months? To be selling that stuff, maybe 4. And then be
What's your
temporary.
thoughts on the review study?
And the parking lot is already existing, so we're not worried about traffic. Or anything else connected with the parking lot. I agree with Ron that it is just for a few months. So I think abbreviated. And we want to encourage farming, and that's a place for it to go. I'm for abbreviated site plan review.
Darren, what do you think?
Uh. Oh. Um. It. I Don't see why, abbreviated site plan review would work there.
And it just look at what our job is. The alleged hardship or whatever it is doesn't apply to a substantial portion of the district or the neighborhood. The requested use granted will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. and it certainly doesn't alter it. We want to encourage it. So, yeah, I still go with abbreviated site plan review.
Jim, what do you think?
Well, we would have to give the waiver, right, whatever we're calling it now, today, to approve that. Oh, we have to have a public hearing on this, correct?
We do, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And this,
So we
so
can't,
this one place
we're
over
just
here.
talking our opinions now, because we can't make any decision. I think if we find a way to go through this and work it, it fits in with the character of our town, farm stands. Every direction you go, there's one.
Yeah, there is. I think he's got a beautiful one there. It's
Every
around this place,
direction.
you know.
And, it's not gonna take up a substantial piece of the real estate driveway over there. Helps benefit the business. Well, I would say we alleviated, we do that.
Okay.
Well,
So this means, because this isn't anything that we're really asked to vote on this time. I want to understand, this means that we just tell them to go ahead and bring it to the planning board as an abbreviated site plan review, but we really are not making a decision tonight. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah, the other thing that I think is important, and this is the really hard part of our job, right? Because we've all got opinions and biases that we try to put aside. But what we're asked to do here is interpret the law, not give our personal opinions as to why it should be easier for her to just have the abbreviated site plan review. And that makes the decision difficult, right? Because we're asked to interpret the law, not say, well, let's make it easy because we want this, so it should be an abbreviated site plan review. Now, I happen to agree with the opinions that have been put forth here, but I just want to remind us that our responsibility is to interpret the law, not to put forth our personal opinions as to whether or not we want to make this easy for her or not, because those are two very different things.
completely different.
Now, because the law is in conflict, then then maybe the personal opinions come into play. But so maybe the best thing to do is leave you with that thought. Our responsibility is to interpret the law, nothing else besides that. Um, and when we put this to a public meeting a month from now and we vote on it, I would just ask for you to put our personal biases aside, of which I've obviously got one, because this seems like, well, of course, why wouldn't we want an agricultural, opportunity like that to exist in town? But that's not what we're asked to do. We're asked to interpret the law.
Well, the big question is, how did they miss that in zoning?
How do they what?
When it comes to
Oh,
zoning.
you got Carol.
Yeah.
How did we miss that in zoning, Carol?
I'm sorry, I can't hear clearly.
I said, how'd we miss that in the zoning when it was done?
Oh, God, we're trying to straighten out a lot of it. We're looking at a lot of things that are not put together right. But
All right.
it's
Well,
slow.
listen, why don't we agree that we'll bring this to a meeting next month for public comment. In the meantime, I'm just going to ask again that people think about, go back, spend the time to go through the zoning laws, offer an opinion, not as to whether or not you support agriculture or whatever, but interpret the law. And if it's a 50-50 balance, then you can say, okay, well, we want to support agriculture, so let's make it easy. Let's do an abbreviated site plan review. But I just want to emphasize to all of us the importance of putting aside personal biases and interpreting the law the way that we are responsible for doing. That makes sense to everybody?
Yep,
Yeah.
sure does.
And we, after the public hearing, we discuss this again before we vote, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
100%. Yep. So we'll next month when we have the public hearing, we will discuss it and vote at that time in public.
okay.
On to our next meeting.
Always the fourth Monday of the month. So the fourth Monday of July.
Whatever, all right, I've got a calendar.
I do.
I had it in my calendar for tonight.
July 28th.
Yeah.
It would be July 28th.
July the 28th.
Cool.
It's the fourth Monday, yes.
Oh, Mom, I never read that.
All right, everyone. Any other comments, questions, thoughts before we move on? Palmer, thank you very much for participating tonight. This is a complicated set of minutes, particularly because we'll have to sit down and because Carol is who she is, you and I and Carol should probably look at the minutes and decide on the note that we want to send to the planning board. But
I think I'll send you a draft before.
okay, great,
I'm not sure.
great.
Hopefully I got everything.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great evening. Now, before we leave, we need a motion and a second to close the meeting.
Make the motion, we close the
I'll second.
meeting.
Okay, no one objects, I assume. All right,
All in-
Carol, what country are you in tonight?
I'm in Italy. I'm in Naples.
Wonderful. I'm in St. Thomas.
Wow.
So,
In an international meeting.
Carol, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning there. My goodness.
That's exactly what it is, and I'm late because the alarm didn't go off, and I apologize for my lateness.
You know what? I got to tell you, Norm is a good man for putting up with it. All right. Good night, all.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.